Isaac was certain that this was the absolute best day he had ever had. Not only had he been invited to the king's festival, which was magnificent and beautiful. He'd never seen anything as amazing as that. But while he was there, he got promoted from a lowly shepherd to the position of vice regent. Now, Isaac confessed he didn't really know what that meant. But King Olaf described it this way, that just as he had cared for sheep as a shepherd, now he was going to be caring for people and the kingdom as the vice regent. Sounded like a terribly big job, but he trusted the king. The king gave him this position. And so he's thinking about all these things, everything that he experienced as he headed home after the festival at the castle. And as he passed through the narrow streets of the castle where there were different merchants selling things and the hustle and bustle of activity, it was almost like Isaac didn't see any of it. He was in his own kind of dream world. As he walked, he kept looking down at his fine new clothes that the king had given him. Never had he seen such fine things, and his robe was a beautiful color. And around his neck, he had this medallion. And he could feel the weight of it hanging on his neck because it was made of solid gold. It was beautiful. And then as he walked, suddenly, as if almost being awoken from his dream, he suddenly remembered the guards. What will the guards think? Simon lived in a small little cabin in the woods, just a short distance outside the castle walls. Simon lived a very simple life. It was a very humble little home. And so when he woke that morning, he was very excited. He was very excited to go to this event that the king was planning, because he had never been to anything as fancy as this festival. And so as he got dressed that morning, he looked for his finest clothes, but there wasn't really many fine clothes in Isaac's cabinet. He basically had very simple clothes of a shepherd. And so he put on his old sheepskin jacket, and as he pulled on his tattered old boots, he said to him, "Well, it's better than going barefoot." For breakfast that morning, Isaac had a cup of tea. He thought maybe he would save space for the feasting that he would do at the festival. But the reality of it was, too, there was very little food in Isaac's cupboards. See, Isaac as a shepherd made enough money to pay his bills, but just enough. He lived pretty close to the edge financially, I guess you could say. He had just enough money to pay for his house and his food and his taxes. But recently, Isaac's neighbor had become quite sick and wasn't able to work for a while. And so he had given some money to take care of his neighbor so he could buy food. And now Isaac knew that this weekend the tax collector would be coming by, and he didn't have enough money to pay the taxes. He wasn't sure what he was going to do about that yet, but he decided that he would go to the king's festival and then try to get some work after so he could make some more money. One of the things that Isaac disliked the most was having to pass through the gates of the castle. Isaac wasn't sure, but he felt like the king had somehow found the largest, meanest men possible to be in charge of the gate. And every time you went through the gate, these big, scary men would ask all kinds of questions. Where are you going? What are you doing? Are you going? What did you do while you were in the castle? Why are you coming to the castle? What do you have with you? And whatever it was that you brought, they would want to look through. Whether it was a little package, they would want to open up and look at it. Or maybe it was a whole cart being pulled by donkeys, and they'd want to go through everything and see what was there. And if ever these guards felt that you weren't being honest with them, or maybe somehow they felt that you weren't a good person, they could block you from entering the castle. Or even worse, they could have you thrown in jail, where you'd be locked up for a while. So Isaac really did not enjoy passing through the castle gates. And it was this that Isaac suddenly remembered Because as he's walking towards the gates, he would be there in a short time, he realized that he, a simple shepherd, was dressed in fine clothes and had this beautiful medallion around his neck. And under his arm, he was carrying this bundle of his old clothes. Well, he totally looked like a thief. He looked like he had stolen these things from the king's festival. How would he begin to explain this? The guards would never believe him. He wondered what to do, and he thought, well, maybe, just maybe, there's so many people passing through the gate today that he'd just be able to go through and the guards would be so busy that maybe they wouldn't notice him. And so as he rounded the corner, just the last corner, just before the gates, he looked and his heart sank because he saw not only was there a few guards, but there were extra guards on duty. Maybe someone earlier in the day had tried to sneak something through the gate and now they had put extra security up. Now Isaac knew for sure he was going to be stopped. For sure they were going to ask him questions. What was he going to say? Isaac moved forward and got into line with everybody else. As he sat there, he was so stressed about what to say. He's filled with worry about how it would go. He started to think through, what could I possibly say that would convince them that I didn't steal these things? As Isaac was called forward, he didn't even look up. He just began saying his story of what he was going to say when he got to the guards. And so he began talking. I know when I came through the gates this morning, I said I was going to the festival of the king, and that's exactly what I did. And then Isaac looked up because he noticed the guards were being unusually quiet. And when he looked up, he was very confused. Because as he looked at the guards, they were kneeling. He looked over at the guards on the other side, and they too were kneeling. Isaac was, what's going on? He was so confused. What's going on here? When suddenly he realized the king, or somebody from the royal court, was probably right behind him. That's why they were kneeling. And so Isaac suddenly spun around to look behind him. But there was nobody there. He looked back at the guards and they were still kneeling. Isaac didn't know what to do. Should he kneel down too, or should he keep going? Nobody was saying anything. So Isaac tentatively took a step or two forward, expecting them to jump up or yell at him and grab him and stop him. But none of them did. And so Isaac kept taking steps, moving closer and closer to the gate. And as he got to the gate and the last guard at the gate, he just couldn't walk away without knowing. His curiosity got the better of him. And so as he got to the last guard, he bent over and said quietly, "Why do you kneel? Why do you kneel?" And the guard, without looking up, said, "You bear the medallion of the Vice-Regent, Your Majesty." Isaac remembered he was wearing that medallion that the king had put on him and told him he was now the Vice-Regent. He still didn't really know what all that meant. But it meant that all the guards bowed to him. So Simon turned and started continuing his walk towards home. He looked back once just to see if the guards were still kneeling. They weren't. They were up working again. But as he continued home, again, his mind was just filled with all kinds of ideas and thoughts and questions about what was going on and all the wonderful things he had seen that day. And as he got close to home, he looked ahead. And he looked at his house and he saw in front of it there was a wagon. He wondered who was visiting his house. And then he remembered the tax collector. Oh, and all of a sudden, Isaac's mind was brought back to reality. And all of a sudden, that knot in his stomach came back. The tax collector was at his house to collect the taxes. And if he didn't have the money to pay the taxes, the tax collector would just fill his cart with Isaac's belongings until he had enough that he could sell and pay the taxes. And so Isaac started to run to get to the tax collector before he grabbed all of Isaac's favorite things, especially his tools. And he was running, just wait, I'll explain, just wait. And he got up, he got close to the tax collector. The tax collector turned to face him. And Isaac, who was out of breath, was panting. He said, wait, let me explain. Let me tell you why I don't have all the... And again he looked, and the tax collector was kneeling. And again Isaac was so confused. This is what happened at the gate. And so he walked up to speak to the tax collector to explain how he didn't have all the money. And he didn't know whether he should kneel or he should stand. So he just stood and spoke to the tax collector. He said, I'm sorry, I don't have all the money to pay my taxes right now. But I do have most of it. And if you'll just give me 2 more days, I'll sell some things and I'll make enough money to pay all the taxes. And the tax collector, without looking up, just said, no, this could never happen. Isaac was distraught. He had to try again. He had to convince the tax collector that if he just gave him 2 more days, he could get the money. And so he was about to begin explaining how he had given the money to someone who was poor, when the tax collector said, I would never collect taxes from anyone who is the vice-regent. I'm sorry for ever stopping here to collect taxes. With your permission, I'll leave. Isaac again was confused. Like, now that he was vice-regent, he didn't have to pay taxes? And so he said to the tax collector, yes, you may leave. Trying to sound like he knew what he was doing. The tax collector quickly got in his cart and left down the road. Isaac watched him leave down the laneway and then went inside his humble little house. Got out a teapot and made himself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table. As he sat there, he started to think, here I am, Isaac, the same man I was this morning. And I'm sitting at the same table I sat at this morning. I'm drinking the same tea from the same cup that I drank this morning. Everything's the same. And yet, because of what the king has done, everything is completely different.